Hey everybody, this is Jordan Rudess from Dream Theater, and you are watching World Prog-Nation.
Hello, today we get to have a conversation with one of my favorite artists, Jordan Rudess from Dream Theater. Jordan, how are you?
Doing pretty well. Happy to be here on this nice sunny day, and it's great to be back in Israel to play. Yeah.
How's the tour?
It's been fantastic. Actually, we've done so many great stops. There's been so much energy around the band and around this tour. Everybody's excited to come out and see us, and they're excited about this kind of focus on images and words again, kind of going back to our roots, if you will. And yeah, it's been really exciting, and I'm looking forward to getting a little break. Actually,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you're revisiting Images and Words is celebrating 25 years since its debut.
Mm-hmm.
Since '92, Prog has been taken to many different creative directions.
Mm-hmm.
You like taking things to a whole new level in Dream Theater, in Liquid Tension Experiment, in LMR, in your solo project. I wanted to know, looking at this broad range of styles
Yes.
that everyone explores in Prog, what do you think stands out about Images and Words?
Well, when I first heard Images and Words, it had a pretty strong effect on me as well as a lot of people. What stood out to me was the very interesting mixture of not only progressive and metal, but also the virtuosity that was present in all the guys' performances. So it was very, timely. I had never heard that particular kind of mixture of prog and metal, especially with those kind of chops.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, these guys are really good. And even though I wasn't so much into metal, I was more always into prog, I still, enjoyed some of the heavier stuff, having played some guitar and that kind of thing. So, I think that combination, the timeliness of Images and Words, the combination of styles, and just the melody, and the emotion of the album makes it really last and have this kind of effect on people. And personally, I love to play it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's the first Dream Theater music I heard. It was the first music that I played with the band, and it brings back and kind of maintains good memories, and it's awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You think it holds up even today? If a new fan wants to hear something of the band, do you think you should start with Images and Words?
I think that it's possible it might sound a little dated because of some production values, but I think that musically, people still enjoy hearing that for the first time as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Images and Words is really one of the most iconic albums in Prog history, and it's only 52 minutes long. These days, prog bands usually write longer albums with a running time of 60 or 70 minutes. So how do you decide when an album is really done?
One of the kind of ways that we have thought about creating albums in these years was to, the Dream Theater way is to, let's put out a really, large piece of work. Like, we're always kind of pushing the boundary for how far we can go. We never have the problem where it's too short, we have the problem where it's too long. The songs are too long, there's too much stuff for the album, we're always kind of spilling over. And part of the reason for that is just that when we get into these writing phases and we're working in the studio, there's a lot of inspiration that comes. When I joined the group, one of the main reasons I think I was brought in was because they wanted to have my creative kind of compositional side come in and join forces with Petrucci and to really accelerate what was going on. And of course we created Scenes from a Memory, And to this day, when I get together with John to write, we always feel like, it's kind of like, snowballing almost. We end up laughing a lot because I'll write a little riff and then he'll write something and then I'll write some more, and we enjoy going back and forth and complementing each other in that way. So there's a lot of magic there. So no shortage of music, and definitely taking the path of making things as kind of grand as possible.
Right. You like to experiment with new sounds and new technologies. You work with companies all over the world.
Right.
How do you combine that in the musical interpretations of even images and words when you play it live?
So I use a little bit of some of my new technology within images and words. For instance, I have an app company called Wisdom Music, and we make our latest app called GeoShred, and I'm using that a little bit on Change of Seasons actually, and also on Under a Glass Moon, and a little bit in the beginning of Hell's Kitchen, because it's just a really cool sound and it's fun. And what's interesting now is that the iOS devices, the processors have become so powerful that it's now possible to have these really amazing instruments on these platforms, plus the multi-touch. So I was able to create something that's really cutting edge and powerful sonically, and so it can really fit into to that world. And plus, at the end of Another Day, where there's a saxophone solo, one of the most amazing virtual sax instruments is playable from my C-board, my Rolly C-board. And I could play a sax sound obviously on my keyboard, but it's even better on the C-board, where you can control vibrato and really get into the expression. So I'm, as many people who follow Dream Theater and people who follow me know that I'm into a lot of new things, and the reason I'm into them is because I'm always looking for new powerful ways to express music. New ways to use touch to really get the most out of the instruments. I mean, the keyboard is great, and my background is classical piano, and I love playing a traditional keyboard, but I'm also looking for more, because technology allows further kind of expression.
Yeah, and it's really comfortable to play live.
Yeah, totally.
That's amazing.
In the old days, you used to change your set list every night, and now you play a fixed set list every night.
Right.
How did you approach composing the set list this time, knowing that images and words is going to take up a big part of it?
Yeah, again, it's just we're looking at a lot of material, and if anything, we just trying to throw too much in. But you know, over the course of time and really looking at the different lists and different choices, we knew we had to play images and words as a block, right? And then there was a lot of discussion about what else we would do. So right now I'm so happy with the way that the evening flows. It just really feels right, and it's a good combination of catalog stuff plus images and words, and of course Change of Seasons at the end.
Okay, let's move on to discussing your latest work, The Astonishing. The Astonishing was described as your most ambitious album to date. How does this album mark the career of Dream Theater, and how important is this release to the career of Dream Theater?
I think that, personally speaking, The Astonishing is probably among my very favorite of the Dream Theater albums that we've done. It was a very deep project, took a lot of time, a lot of focus, not only on the composition part, but also on the staging of it. It was definitely our grandest production. We've never done anything like that as far as you know, the video and the lights and the whole thing. Anybody who's seen it, I think, kind of agrees that it was our biggest and probably best production. We also tried to do things a little bit differently and go down a slightly different path. And not only was it a concept album, but the whole thing was written almost like a score. So the music always is supporting the story, and it goes through a lot of dynamic waves. So people, you know, are kind of being asked to go for a ride where it gets really mellow, and then it gets really intense. And so this was an album where I sat down with John Petrucci, and we basically worked every day composing this, looking at the story, just really focusing on it, and we feel really like happy with what came out.
Yeah, awesome. So The Astonishing is the second full concept album in your career, with the first one being Scenes from a Memory.
Right.
In terms of writing approach, how do they differ one from another?
Well, Scenes from a Memory was the first album, and when I came into the group, I didn't know the quote-unquote rules that they had, and in those days the rules were kind of like, oh, we're going to write the music together, and so what happened was I was very inspired after I had been asked to join the group. So, you know, to just make the long story really, really short, so after Liquid Tension Experiment was over, and John and Mike Portnoy and I, we had a real bond working together and created two very successful instrumental rock albums. They came back to me and approached me and said, Jordan, we know we've asked you once before, but would you like to join Dream? We really want you to join Dream Theater. And in those days, Derek Sherinian was playing, and so he kind of came in when at the first time I had said no for various reasons. So anyway, so I said yes this time, and I joined Dream Theater. And what happened was that I wrote about like 50 different ideas, like on my own to bring in. I was so excited. And when I got there with the recording, Mike was kind of like, oh, we kind of want to write all this together. But he couldn't resist listening to some of the stuff. And so some of the stuff, you know, we used on that recording. But that was very different because it was a different vibe with everybody in the room. And we tried for this last album, because of the nature of it, because it was very like, had to be really like seriously composed. So John and I sat down together and really wrote that album. And that's not how Dream Theater albums are usually done anyway. Usually John and I write, you know, a lot of the music, but usually it's more like we're sitting in the studio and we're with John Mayung and Mike Mangini, and James is there a lot of the time. So,
I always wanted to know, when writing a song in The Astonishing, did John Petrucci already know what it's going to be about, or did you have the basic story, wrote all the songs, and later matched each song to a certain point in the story?
John had the basic story, and when we came to writing the music, he literally had almost like index cards for each part. And so every day in the morning we would come together and we would review where we're up to in the story. So when we were writing the music, he was pretty much just making refinements in the story, and we were like matching the mood. So we would do a review. And as he would, you know, I usually think in terms of music sooner than I do like words. So as he's telling me the story, I'm already kind of ready to play as he speaks, you know, the keyboard. And a lot of the stuff, you know, from me came up like that. He'll tell me the story and I'll kind of get a vibe and then sit at the keyboard and then play it. Some of the stuff, you know, there's a lot of repeating themes, and one funny story is there's the brother theme. Brother, can you hear me? Da, 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 da. So, and it repeats throughout the album, but the thing was that we wanted to repeat it in different ways. So one time it was maybe choral, the next time it's, you know, with some kind of like orchestration, but we wanted to have it appear at a certain point, reappear at a certain point of the album, and I wasn't sure what to do, and I was kind of a little bit stuck. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna go out for a walk. And so as soon as I walked out of the studio door and got to the street to take my walk, all of a sudden I heard it in my head what I wanted. And shit, I gotta remember this when I get back. And I had these kind of like moving chords around this pretty simple melody. And when I got back, I played it and we were like, yeah, that's cool, that's it. So sometimes you have to, the lesson there is that, you know, as a creative person, sometimes it's not great to just sit there, like, you know, trying to bring the creativity when, you know, in front of your instrument, or if you're a writer in front of your book. Sometimes it's good to go outside, get some air like we're getting today, and maybe some inspiration will come upon you, and that's often best.
Similar to Scenes from a Memory, where you also knew the basic story when you wrote the song?
That was a whole different thing. The scene story was not as like developed and not written in this particular
Yeah.
way. This is a very detailed, very big story,
Yeah.
turning into a book now
Yeah,
as well.
that's what I was just about to ask.
Yeah.
You guys just released a full video preview of the novel of the Astonishing
Right.
story. Can you tell us a bit more about that? How involved was the band in the writing of the book with the author?
John basically worked very closely with Peter Aurelian. Peter is a longtime friend of the band's, longtime friend of mine, and he's a great writer. So even though I'm not a big reader, I do a lot of reading of music, sheet music, but not so much of books. But I'm told, and I will read it, that the book is really awesome. And he's a very accomplished author too, and he filled in a lot of the story and added characters, and it should be really great.
Great.
Yeah.
And this album is a great combination of the modern prog metal sound with more classical elements and orchestrations.
Mm-hmm.
Was it hard to write music like that, the both of you, or was it?
It was just fun. It actually called upon parts of myself that are not usually called upon in Dream Theater. For instance, to create the music of the Nomax. Like to do all the electronic things. I'm really into electronic music, and so that was like, okay, great, I'll get to do some of this with Dream Theater. So I called up my different, virtual instruments and my tools, and I started to make, all these crazy sounds and formulate what the Nomax should sound like. And for the orchestral stuff, that was also kind of a pleasure and something that I love to do, but I don't usually do with Dream Theater. When we first went into the album, we knew we wanted to have it orchestrated traditionally. So the idea was that I would play more like piano and organ and more kind of rootsy vintage stuff, which was great. But when we got to the studio, instead of just writing the songs and expecting David Campbell, who did the orchestration, to just do it later and wait to hear it like that, we wanted to hear it like that. So I ended up using my virtual instruments and creating the strings and the brass and all and even choir stuff, and just like making it sound like really cool right there, and then handing it to David and saying, okay, this is what we want. Mm-hmm. So I had a good time because I got to do kind of like a pre-orchestration thing and allow us to feel and hear what it would be like.
Awesome. Okay, let's move on to more general questions. What are your thoughts about the current prog scene, about challenges that the young musicians need to overcome in the age of the internet?
Yeah. This is a question that comes up every day, basically. And the current music scene is just so complicated because, you have an overwhelming number of places to listen to music and find out about bands, but it's kind of like, it's almost like a wash. It's so hard because you have everybody out there in the world kind of like able to get free music, or thinking they can just get anything they want, not even thinking, they can get anything they want on YouTube. Makes it very hard to sell any kind of music. So we're at this point where music is just like people aren't making money on like album sales or anything like that. So what is a new band supposed to do?
Yeah.
It's really hard. If somebody asks me nowadays, I'm a musician, I really want to get in the business, I say, well, you should definitely be thinking about what else can you fall back on if you're, if you want to do this, great, and if you love it, great, but have something else to fall back on. Maybe learn more about the music industry and get involved in some other element of it or some other profession, because the reality is that some of the happiest musicians are those people who don't have to, depend on it to make their living. It's the reality, but then somebody said, well, you did it, right? And the reality there is, yes, I did it, but it was a different period of time. I'm a very different person. I was always very one-track kind of person, never really great at doing much else, but really good at doing this one thing. And it took me a long time to do it. It was not, people think that getting in the music space and becoming a professional musician is going to be like magical, like music is magical. But the reality is it's not like that. You have to really, refine your craft, whether it's in front of a guitar or a keyboard, in front of a computer. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of focus. So for me, it was a pretty winding road till I really got so beyond just enjoying playing music, till I got set up where I could do my music and actually have it feed the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't come like that.
Definitely. What are your favorite active prog bands, from 2000 and beyond?
Oh, well, I'm these days I'm more into other kinds of music, other bands like Sigur Rós I like a lot. I like electronic music like Auditor, or Tetra, some people call it. I like Stephen Wilson's music a lot. I mean, I'm a big fan of his music. I think Haken's really a good band. I like some of the stuff that they do. Those are some things.
Awesome. Do you think that maybe when you're writing, you get inspired by those kind of bands? Newer bands?
I don't really get inspired. I don't really listen to a lot of new prog stuff, because I think a lot of the new prog stuff is just kind of tipping the hat to Genesis, Pink Floyd, King Crimson, Gentle Giant, ELP, and for prog I'm more coming from that place, and I like to take my prog, and if I'm gonna forward think it, I like to kind of mix it with my love for what's happening nowadays with electronic music and sound, and so in my own music that's kind of where it's coming from. So as far as getting inspiration from other prog bands, not so much.
Okay. Is it important for you guys to start every new album with a vision in mind? Because I know that in albums like Systematic Chaos, it was almost a conscious decision not to start with a clear vision, but still that album turned out pretty consistent in its sound.
Yeah. Well, Dream Theater is notorious for being, even in an album like that, we were very almost conceptually set on doing it a certain way. So we never go into an album with a blank slate, really. It's always clearly defined, and it's even always pretty clearly defined what the response will be. So, and I think that's been a really key element to Dream Theater's success, is that there's a lot of kind of planning and kind of foresight into what we want to happen and what is going to happen.
Is it hard to come up with new ideas every time?
Again, musically speaking, it's not hard to constantly create music. Conceptually speaking, well, that takes some thought. But a lot of times, coming out of the Astonishing, for instance, we have kind of a clear idea of where we might go. In the sense of, we're not going to do another, concept album at this point. We definitely know that. We know, we know that the fans are asking maybe to get away from kind of, the really more gentle stuff and go for something that's a little bit more intense. Okay, and we're into that idea. So again, and we haven't really started writing much of the new album yet. But yeah, by the time we sit in the studio to do it, we'll have a pretty clear idea of where we want to go.
And you will work on it in 2018?
We will work on it in 2018, right. I actually got a position as an artist in residence at Stanford University.
Wow.
And I'm going to be there from January through April. So, and after that, we'll start working on it.
Great. So you answered my question about the
Oh, great.
You guys always talk about how you're all very skilled musicians, so that there won't be any limitations technically that would prevent you from doing something musically. I think that's a big part of prog music, that you won't limit yourself when you're writing music. Do you think that someone has to be schooled in music or experienced in music to fully understand or enjoy your music?
Well, that brings up a couple of thoughts. First of all, where all of us in this band are interested in the idea of being virtuosos at our instrument, and what that means, and to just clarify what that means, because a lot of musicians and a lot of people get confused about that whole idea. To be to have a really good technique on an instrument and to be a virtuoso, it basically means that you're able to take what's in your creative mind, and if you're a guitarist or a keyboard player, you can get that musicality through your physical body into your instrument and create basically the end result, create what's in your head. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can play the Paganini, violin concerto or something perfectly A-sun. It means that you can express a beautiful slow melody with this incredible expression, and also if something calls for something fast and clean, that you can do that too. So for me as a musician, it's all about constantly practicing and working towards the goal of allowing this kind of freedom of expression from my mind to my hands, so there's no roadblock in whatever I want to create. And if I achieve that, then yes, there's skill involved, and you become a virtuoso. So that's kind of like, I think, where everybody's at. So as far as the listener goes, I think when a musician has that kind of skill, I think then it translates to the listener, where the listener could say maybe he or she doesn't like to listen to a certain kind of music. I think any listener will appreciate if the music they're listening to is created by someone who's skilled enough to accurately kind of put the creative vision forward. So it's not distorted by a lack of technical ability to get what's in your head out into the musical world. And to be a musician doesn't mean you have to necessarily be playing on a keyboard or geoshred or a guitar or anything. You could be manipulating a computer, and that's fine. But again, you need to have to have the skills to make that fluid and happen in a musical way.
What album do you think is a good introduction to Dream Theater for a new listener?
I think Scenes from a Memory is a great one at this point. Images and Words is a good one too, but maybe production-wise it goes back so far that it might not be relatable to some people. There's not really one that I like that much more than the other one, because each album that I've done with Dream Theater has taken a lot of care and a lot of love, and we spend a lot of time to make sure it's right. So,
Awesome. What do you think the future holds for Dream Theater?
Well, it looks. We just had an amazing tour with fans all over the world. Tons of them came out. A lot of excitement, a lot of energy. Everybody in the band is really strong still, and we're crazy drivers here, and everybody's playing well. So I think the future is bright. I'm looking forward to getting back in the studio and writing more music with the guys.
And last but not least, do you have anything to say to your World Prog-Nation fans?
Well, I'm thankful that there are World Prog-Nation fans. It's a wonderful thing. It's been incredible watching the Dream Theater fan community over the years, maintain their life. And I know recently it kind of became more like congealed, almost into one. So it's really rewarding, especially to get together with guys like you guys in different countries and kind of keep this dream alive. It's awesome. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you very, very, very much for your time.
You're welcome.
And I'll see you tonight.
Okay, great.